Good morning, third grade. We're going to go into our reading books now, and we're going to read something that's quite a bit different, and yet there are some similarities to what we read last week. We are going to be reading The Grasshopper and the Ant. Now, last week we learned that grasshoppers can turn into locusts when they need to get food. Now, what we read last week was informational. I thought it was very interesting. And it was facts, all true things. Today, The Grasshopper and the Ant is a fable. Now, if we were at school, we could raise our hands and tell us what we know about fables. And so I'm going to just review a little bit. Fables are not true. Fables are usually short stories, and something about the characters. The characters are oftentimes animals that can speak and behave as people. Now, not always, but usually there's one character who might be kind of lazy or sneaky or maybe doesn't do the right thing. And then usually there's another character who's a really good example because they do the right thing. They use their brains to be smart. And at the end of the story, you're usually able to come up with some kind of lesson that we learn from the fable. And the lesson is called the moral. So as I read, I want you to think about the characters, Grasshopper and Ant, and what the lesson might be. I'm on page 260. You can follow along. The Grasshopper and the Ant, an Aesop's fable, adapted by Margaretha Redd. I don't know if that's how you pronounce her name. Grasshopper loved to sing and play his fiddle. He played quiet songs and thunderous tunes. Sometimes Grasshopper played frightening music. Then he would hop around in a dramatic way. That's when he caused accidents. One time, Grasshopper jumped into a pile of grain that Ant had spent all day collecting. The grain scattered across the landscape. "You should be more careful, Grasshopper," scolded Ant. "I worked hard to gather that grain. Now I have to pile it up again." "I'm sorry," said Grasshopper. "Why not take a break? It's a beautiful sunny day. You'll have plenty of days to gather food." "Oh, you may think so, Grasshopper, but winter will soon be here." "Then the ground will be frozen solid," said Ant. "Now is the time to gather food and plan for survival. You should take a break from playing and do some work." Grasshopper said, "I'll migrate to someplace warm if it gets too chilly. That way I can keep on playing and singing. But for now, I'll play any song you like to make your work easier to do." Weeks later, fat flakes of snow began to drift from the sky. Grasshopper shivered. It was so cold that he could hardly hold his fiddle. Grasshopper looked for food, but the ground had turned into a blanket of white snow. "What will I do now? I can't find food, and it's too cold for me to go far. Maybe Ant will help me," thought Grasshopper. Grasshopper trudged through the snow and knocked on Ant's door. "Will you give me food if I sing and play for you?" asked Grasshopper. Ant said, "Yes, I will. I worked hard the rest of the year, so now I have time to relax and have fun." And the moral of the story? There are times to work and times to play. Now, think about putting that moral into your own words. The lesson that you think Grasshopper learned. And we're going to go now to page 108 in our workbook. And we're going to do our grammar lesson. And at the bottom of this grammar lesson page, I want you to write in your words, what lesson did Grasshopper learn? What was the lesson that Grasshopper learned or needed to learn? And now we're going to go to the lesson. Less common plurals. Plural means more than one, and usually we just add S to a word. But not always. There are some words where we might have to change the spelling, like change a Y to I and add ES. We had some spelling words like that. But there are some other words like knife, leaf, that have different kinds of spellings. And we went through this once in class. It says, choose the missing word from the box. So here's the box: knives, leaves, hooves, lives, loaves. We're going to write the word on the line where it belongs and then reread each complete sentence. Now the thing is, what we talked about in class was knives, 2 knives, 1 knife. We changed the F to V and add ES. 1 leaf, many leaves. We change the F to V and add ES. 1 hoof, 4 hooves. Change that F to a V and add ES. 1 life, 2 lives. We change the F to a V and add ES. 1 loaf of bread, 2 loaves of bread. Change the F to a V and add ES. Let's look at number 1. The blacksmith put shoes on the horse's knives, the horse's leaves, hooves, lives, or loaves. Number 2, run for your... The volcano is erupting. Run for your knives? Why, would that make sense? Run for your loaves? Which word would make sense there? Number 3, do you have any of wheat bread? A type of bread. Bread comes in autumn, the fall from the trees. They might be orange or gold or brown or red. Set the table with forks, blanks, and spoons. All right, remember, once you finish this page, write in your words the lesson that Grasshopper needed to learn. And then be sure to take a picture and send that to me. Next, I'm going to read to you our grammar test. I haven't yet assigned the reading comprehension and vocabulary. We're going to do that tomorrow, but today we're going to do the grammar section. So make sure it says grammar at the top of the page. And this is lesson 22 from The Journey, Stories of Migration, Grammar. So make sure you've got the right page. It's page 33, down here at the bottom. And I'm going to read the questions and you'll choose your answer. Number 1, we're going to find which part of words best complete the sentence below. Which word or words best completes the sentence below. Pearl walked blank than her brother. Pearl walked quick than her brother, quickest than her brother, most quickly than her brother, more quickly than her brother. Choose A, B, C, or D. Number 2. Last week's spelling test was hard, but this week's test was hard. But this week's test was harder. This week's test was hardest. This week's test was hardly. Now we're comparing two things, last week's test and this week's test. Number 3. Marigolds and lilacs are pretty, but roses are prettier. Roses are pretty. Roses are most pretty. Roses are more pretty. Well, we're comparing marigolds. They're those orange and yellow flowers that we see a lot, especially on Day of the Dead. And lilacs, they're purple and white and they come out on bushes. And roses. So we're comparing 3 things. So if it's more than 2, remember that rule? Number 4. Wednesday was the sad day of my life. Wednesday was the sadder day of my life. Wednesday was the saddest day of my life. Wednesday was the sadly day of my life. We're comparing Wednesday with all the other days. So that's a lot of days to compare. Turn to page 34. Which word or words best complete these sentences? Friday is the soon they could fix our car. Friday is the sooner they could fix our car. Friday is the soonest they could fix our car. Friday is the most soon they could fix our car. So they're comparing Friday with all the other days of the week. Number 6. It was the wetter June on record. Well, we have lots and lots of Junes on record. By that we mean we can look back at last year's month of June and the year before month of June and the year before that, and we can go back over 100 years. Farmers' almanacs keep a record of all of those temperatures and rainfall. So we're comparing June this year with all the other Junes. It was the wetter June on record, the wettest June on record, the most wet June on record, the most wetter June on record. Number 7. Jane turned her assignment in early, but Sherry turned hers in earlier than Jane. Earliest than Jane? More early than Jane? More earliest than Jane. We're comparing Jane and Sherry, just 2 people. Number 8. Luke drives more carefully on the busy highway than he does on the country road. Luke drives most carefully on the busy highway than he does on the country road. Luke drives more careful on the busy highway than he does on the country road. Luke drives most careful on the busy highway than he does on the country road. So we're comparing how he drives on the highway and on the country road. 2 things are being compared. Listen through that one again. Number 9. Grandpa moves slow than he did before his illness. Grandpa moves slowly than he did before his illness. Grandpa moves more slowly than he did before his illness. Grandpa moves more slower than he did before his illness. They're comparing now to all the other days. Last one. Sue's hair is curly than Jan's. Sue's hair is curlier than Jan's. Sue's hair is most curlier than Jan's. Sue's hair is more curlier than Jan's. We're comparing 2 girls, Sue and Jan, and what their hair is like. All right, take a picture and send it to me when you finish.